My mom, she's always happy to help nursing students because that's what she works in. She teaches all the pre-nursing students with physio. So she would know if you'd be able to get a job doing that.
I know that this college
you
said
mean
no
just passing
online
it?
courses, no online labs, nothing at the end.
Oh, yeah, I know.
Yeah,
this.
I mean there are programs where you can take part of it online and then you take like the hands-on stuff. You have to go onto campus or they have certain locations. But the question is, will people hire you if that's what you have your degree in?
You mean
So-
if it's online?
If it's online, yeah.
Okay.
Because she always suggests people go to Loma Linda, because then you're guaranteed you'll get hired.
So, how would I talk with your mom? Or how do I get in touch with
Just-
her and talk with her?
Just you could email her lisa.harvey@vvc.edu, or just
Or we
go
could
over
text
there.
her, bring a cup of coffee, Mom.
Yes.
So she's over in the back.
If she walks in, you can ask her.
Okay,
Yeah, she's just in the building next door. If I remember on my break, I'll ask her for you.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, thanks.
Our
Maybe
brain.
it's Linda, then you got the GPS.
I just am concerned about financially.
Oh,
It's always a
I bought a
finance
house
issue.
up my street.
Me too. And a couple cars.
All right, you ready? Exam 3 is up. The quiz for chapter 11 is up. If you guys haven't seen that.
Oh, I looked yesterday. Was it up yesterday?
It-
wasn't last night.
Yeah, I put it up late last night.
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry, I got distracted and forgot.
No worries.
But yeah, I figured nobody's emailed me asking where it is yet, so nobody must be ready to take it.
Yeah, I wasn't in any hurry.
Yeah. But yeah, it is up. The deadlines are set for Friday at midnight for chapter 11 quiz, Monday at midnight for the exam. Okay?
I always say, she said Sunday. Psychologically.
Yeah.
It's gotta be done.
There you go. Give yourself extra day. All right. So chapters for the next exam, chapter 13, 14, 15. And I'm doing it in reverse order because I was thinking about it this morning. Like, it doesn't make sense. I don't know why they have it in that order. Because really, it's family, attachment, and morality. And in my opinion, morality is based on the attachment that develops within your family. So it makes more sense to me to teach it in the other direction, which I usually do. So I don't know why I put it in the syllabus in the order I did. But we're going to go through those chapters the opposite order. Okay, so chapter 15 is the family. So basically in this chapter we're going to be talking about what is the state of the family currently, how does the family develop, we'll talk about divorce, its effect on children, and so on. It's an interesting chapter. Uh-oh, yeah. All right, so the family is a system. Remember day one we talked about systems theory, where there's multiple systems that we're part of. There's culture, religion, school system. Family is a system within itself. By the way, all families work best with 3. It's called triangulation. So if you grew up in a family that was even semi-dysfunctional, which really what family isn't, you probably noticed some triangulation happening. So like for instance, me and my 2 sisters, my biological sisters, so I was closest to them, whenever 2 of us would fight, you always go to the 3rd one to complain about the other one, right? So you always bring a 3rd person into the system. If your parents are fighting, one of the parents may go to you or one of the other siblings for that sort of support. Because whenever you bring, it's sort of like a stool, you know, with 2 legs, it's totally unstable, it'll fall over. But you have a 3rd one, and now there's stability in that system. So we see the same thing happening in families. Sometimes a dog even gets brought in as the 3rd one. I remember in graduate school we did a case study on the Fonda family, you know, Jane Fonda, Peter Fonda, all those people. Really dysfunctional family, right? Betraying the country to Vietnam and so on. You don't know about that. And research Jane Fonda in Vietnam. You won't like her quite so much as an actress. Although her workout video was great. Anybody remember
Yes,
that? Right?
I still do it.
I still do it. Yeah, totally. So anyhow, they triangulated out on their dog. It was a big part of the system. So when the parents divorced, the dog was like they had a major custody battle over the dog. So instead of having to deal with their own stuff, they dealt with the dog. Yeah. Anyhow, it's interesting. So it is difficult to define a family across all cultures and time periods. The definition of a family has changed somewhat. You know, in the modern world, we have the nuclear family. So mom, dad, and 3 kids, ideally, right? That is the traditional family. However, different cultures would define family differently. family may be extended family, so the multi-generational families all living in the same home. That's how my family lives, because we have a big clan on a big property with multiple houses, so we all sort of stick together. So there's my mom, sometimes my grandma also lives with us. She kind of bounces around between the families. Sometimes, yeah, just whenever she's in the mood. So my grandma's 83, there's my mom, there's me and my sister and my sister's kids all living together, which we like. But that's not really the traditional way of doing it today, but that has been traditional in the past. It's a lot easier to function when you have multiple generations living together.
Yeah.
Can all help each other out. Some cultures may have even described the family as much more extended, including cousins and cousins' parents, and really, really extended, like the entire village is family. So some Native American cultures, they don't have words for cousin. Cousins are called siblings. So it's still your brother and sister, even if it is your first cousin. So that they haven't had a different definition of family. However, I mean, family is still, we still get the idea of family would make sense to us in the same way today as it would to somebody, 5 centuries ago in Egypt, right? We still understand family. So family systems theory, this is actually what my specialty is. My doctorate was family systems theory. So this is how does the family work as a system interacting with all of the different systems around it. So a marital or family therapist would not, if possible, would not treat just an individual. If we possibly could, we would bring in as many people in the system as we could at some point, because we know that a problem is not just individual either. A problem is systemic. So if you look at alcoholism, you can't just say this individual has an addiction problem. It's also the people around them are codependent. The society is encouraging it. There's, I heard of one therapist who brought in the local liquor store owner into a therapy session in order to try to get him to understand the problem and to support the person in, getting off of alcohol. So that is the idea of systems theory. Now, families are also dynamic, meaning that they change. They're self-organizing, meaning that as the environment changes, the family will reorganize itself in order to cope best with the situation. That may be in a functional way, it may be in a dysfunctional way. So when mom and dad are divorcing, child maybe takes somebody's side in order to help that family member cope better with the situation. Now, on the bright side, this adaptation, this dynamicness of families really helps to keep families stable. And even in a really dysfunctional situation where there's abuse or there's alcoholism or whatever type of addiction, that, even though in the long term it can be dysfunctional, in the short term, the way we are acting helps to sustain the family and helps to keep people going. So a lot of times I'll get people into therapy and they're like, I have these habits and I think this certain way and I'm so dysfunctional, it's causing so many problems. And I look at it and I think, well, yeah, or I tell them this, it's causing you problems now, but it was a great survival mechanism when you were a child. I mean, it kept you alive, it kept you surviving, kept your family together. When a child of an alcoholic becomes overly responsible, well, if you didn't do that, your siblings would have starved to death. So yes, today maybe it's causing you problems, but you originally developed it because it was very adaptive. It was required in order to survive. So don't beat yourself up so much for continuing to do something into adulthood that in childhood was actually really good for you. In sort of a twisted way, but it was good for you. And then of course the systems idea that families are embedded within larger social systems, neighborhood, community, society, government, etc. So those are all really important parts of thinking about the family. Now there is a life cycle to the family. There are stages that we go through. I think I have a chart. Yes, I did put a chart. So there's 8 stages to this one popular theory of family. So now the important thing about recognizing different stages is that different problems happen at different stages. In my field of psychology, we always say that the problems come at transition points. In between transitions, we don't really have that many problems. We sort of get into it, we keep going, we adapt, we're fine. But then it's when the environment changes again, that's when the emotional issues come up. So stage 1, a married couple without children. Then you have a childbearing family, family with preschool kids, family with school-age kids, teenagers, launching the young adult, so we got that empty nest syndrome. Well, the next one's really family without children, and then an aging family where your parents are getting older.
Are those the roles, available roles, wife, mother, husband, father, are those in any, is that an order of how you function in the family? Like, I would think first, I'm a mother, sorry, my husband, but my kids are, and their needs are first.
Yes,
And then it's
so
you?
Duval, the guy who came up with these stages, he did say that he believed this was the correct order for people to view themselves in.
Order.
Yeah. So he did say that he did believe you should view yourself as a wife before you view yourself as a mother, which there's some support for that. I mean, I think it's situational. Like, if it comes between like a bear killing my husband or my children, I'm probably going to protect my children. Sorry guys, lift weights or something, like you're going to have to fend for yourself. However, research does support the idea that when it comes to like what relationship should you spend the most time working on emotionally building, the better your relationship with your spouse, the healthier your children will be. So there should be less emphasis on the parent-child relationship and more emphasis on the married relationship in order, not that you should ignore your kids, obviously, but the emphasis should be more on that marital relationship in order to create better children. The best thing you could do for your kids is to have a good marriage.
Like giving yourself the oxygen before you take it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, if you and your spouse can't get along, you're going to divorce, you're miserable, then your children are going to suffer for that. It doesn't matter how much quality time you spend with your kids. Yeah. So that was Duval's theory. Now, one of the criticisms is that some people don't have kids. And so modern researchers have been looking at like what is the life cycle of the single person, what is the life cycle of the family that doesn't have children, because there are going to be different transition points that they go through. And I mean, there's no really accepted stages that have come out of research and been super accepted by the psychology field yet for single people and for people married without children. But it would be really good to know. So like if I get, and nowadays a lot of people are waiting a long time to have kids, so when they come into therapy, what's really precipitating it? And I don't know the answer to that because the research hasn't really come up with a good life stage system yet. But it would be helpful to know what's precipitating the problems in these different situations. All right, so going back to this, probably covered all of this. So each stage is a distinctive developmental task, just like Freud's psychosexual stages or Erickson's stages of development. Each one, there's a crisis point in each of these stages that changes the course of the family, changes the emotional and literal composition of the family. Okay? But the criticism is, of course, that we don't all go through the traditional family life cycle, especially nowadays. A lot of people are anti-marriage, anti-children. There's a teacher in the biology department, he's married, but he's like, I'm never having kids because I like my Harley, and that's what I want to spend my money on. Okay, it's probably a good thing he didn't have kids then. But that's his choice. So if he wants to spend his money on Harley instead of children, then.
Would you say that men don't have the desire as much as women do in their biological clocks telling them that that's their job to have a child, and maybe that's why he values his Harley as his...
I don't know, because his wife agrees with him.
Oh.
She spends her money on Great Danes. So I don't know.
Great Danes love to keep kids up.
Yeah, Great Danes are good dogs.
I asked that because my in-laws, all the wives wanted to have kids. My husband's brothers did not want children.
Yeah, it does seem like
And
men
they said
have
it was
less of
money.
a drive to have kids, and I don't think money's really the issue. I think it's that it's a big responsibility.
They're like, we couldn't be, millionaires without if we had children, we'd be spending it all on them. And he said,
Although,
we spend this much on children every, for 18 years, we spend this much on them. So that's a lot of money.
Per
Like
child.
almost $1 million, right? So
Something like
600
that. Although I
something.
don't understand why that's necessary, personally. But like, here's a stuffed animal, or here's a stick, go play with it, you're fine.
That only works for so long, unfortunately.
My children are going to be a lot cheaper, I think, if I ever have kids.
It's mostly the diapers.
The diapers, right?
Yeah.
But then you can look at Chinese culture, and they potty train their kids by like 4 months old or something. Yeah, it's
Gosh, we should be studying that.
call that? There's a term
I
for it, I
think
don't
that's
remember.
traumatic, no?
But-
Like, what do they do to make kids do that?
Yeah, I don't know, their kids don't wear diapers though. Yeah, so they just, although if you go to China, you might see parents holding their kids over a trash can and the kids going to the bathroom or something.
Huh.
So there's pros and cons to that whole thing. But yeah, so it's interesting. So I don't know, I think men don't have quite as big of a drive, but I definitely know some men who are really upset by not having kids. You know, their wife has fertility problems or they have fertility problems and it's a big deal for the family. So I think it kind of just depends on how they're raised. So, because in our society, we we totally say that men don't care as much about relationships and marriage and children as women do. And I think we end up raising boys who don't care about that quite as much. So, I don't know. It's becomes a cycle. Okay, so some trends in the U.S. More single adults than ever in the history of our country. 28% of single adults have never been married, particularly in the millennial generation. The millennials are big on no marriage, probably because millennials grew up in the 80s, which was when the highest rate of divorce ever in our country was going on. Divorce rates have dropped since the 1980s. So you had a lot of children growing up in divorced families without a lot of resources to deal with it. So I think today there's more emotional resources in the world, and they didn't want to do the same thing to their lives and to their children. So they're just all terrified of getting married. I'm hoping the next generation is more pro-marriage. Seems to be so far with the research, but next generation is still pretty young, so it's hard to say. But I have a wedding opinion, so I hope we can get married. And then more are postponing marriage, so we're getting married at later and later ages. Yeah.
If the parents are still together and have the kids, like, is there a difference between?
There's a
putting
huge
that
difference.
label?
Yeah, there's a significant difference. I think it's somewhere like 40% difference in divorce rate. So if your parents are divorced, you have a much higher chance of getting divorced than somebody whose parents are still together.
Yep. But I mean, like, if they just chose not to get married.
Oh,
instead,
still
then
higher
yeah.
divorce rate. Mm-hmm. Yeah, if your parents are just living together and never got married, you'll still have a higher divorce rate than somebody with married parents.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's
That's
not
interesting.
protective for people to just live together. It's still.
Well, aren't they still setting a good example of a functioning household and responsible parents?
You would think,
even
but it
though
doesn't
there's no
actually-
certificate.
It doesn't actually turn out that way. Yeah, it's more protective than like if you had abusive parents or you had parents who went through an acrimonious divorce or something like that. But no, it's not as protective as an actual marriage. There's just something about marriage that does something to our psychology. And as much as we try to say, oh, marriage is nothing but a paper that says we're together, that's not how we view it.
Yeah, you want to work at it because if you don't, half and half.
Yep.
It's a dividing of the
Yeah.
and
Although
I've
if
made
you
this
live
money.
together in California for more than I think a year, it's still half and half. Doesn't matter if you're married or not. Yeah, I think it's a year, something like that. Yeah.
Right, I
That's
heard
not-
there's
that's not
no, hardly any common law states.
There's
California is not a common law, pretty
Yeah.
sure.
No, California still
It
has.
Really?
Yeah,
No.
it's not considered
No.
a common law marriage, but you still are. I know because my dad's a cop and he's had to go to multiple
Well, I have been
situations.
through
where
law
he-
school, and I got to tell you, it's like 6 years before you can.
Oh, maybe it is longer than a
it's
year.
like 6
It's
years.
much
But there is
longer
still
than a
year.
there is still a point where the law considers you're not married, but the law considers that your property belongs to the two of you. So it's
Mhm,
still
your own
50-50.
property. If you inherited money from your mom, and in that.
Yeah,
5
if you
or 6
came
years,
into the
that's
relationship,
your
that's
money,
different. Yeah, absolutely. Or I think a gift or something like that is yours. But yeah, at some point, even living together, it's still 50-50. Yeah, just like. But there's still something about that it's still not the same as marriage. So people who live together and then decide to get married, their divorce rate is through the roof. So
Really?
because as soon as they get married, something changes in their mindset. And now all sorts of problems. I had a friend who he lived together with his now wife for 26 years. And they finally decided, oh, we've been together for 26 years, let's just get married, it'll be fun. And then all of a sudden, man, he's lucky he had a friend who was a therapist because they barely made it. It was amazing.
Did they take ownership, or did he take ownership? You're my wife now? Maybe there's an ownership thing, or I don't know.
Yeah, that's part of it for sure. That's part of it.
Watch you do that for the rest of my life.
Women,
Yeah,
they were
right?
They
Yeah.
were living with each other for 26 years.
26 years. You'd think that the transition
Yeah.
to marriage would be meaningless, but it wasn't.
Just the other day
Yeah.
when you come home after having been married that day or something.
Right.
But
What
Yeah.
was going through my mind is like, why didn't they just get married before? It was 26,
Well,
that's
see,
a
that's
long
the
time.
real question is there's a different mindset with people who just cohabitate and people who get married. And people who cohabitate, there's always the thought of escape. Like I can always leave.
Yeah.
And so it's a different mindset. There's not as strong of a commitment to cohabitation as there is to marriage. And you'd think 26 years, that's pretty committed, but there's still the thought that I could escape in the back of their mind. So once they got married, now all of a sudden it's like, we're
It
really
all hit
stuck.
them at once.
Yeah,
have
it hit them all at
grandchildren
once.
in
Yeah.
26 years.
So if you wanna see how somebody is around the house, cause it's very different, like
They
you
do
don't
have
get to see
grandchildren.
them. Do you just like visit them during the day to the evening, go back to your
Oh.
house? I mean not every day, but
Yeah, 'cause
it's
cohabit-
important to see
Yeah.
how they are.
Yes, absolutely. Dating should not just be like, oh, we go out and have fun together. Dating
Yeah.
is supposed to be testing the person. Is this really the person that I should marry? What is this person really like?
And how can you know unless you live with the person? Do you advocate that or no?
No, because cohabitation increases the rate of divorce
But
tremendously.
then you get to see, oh, he leaves his dirty underwear on
Right,
the floor. He
it
does
makes,
that.
it makes sense,
But what
and
if you go over during the day and the evening?
you
after
still
a
see
while?
the underwear out there.
Yeah,
Yes.
so couldn't you do that?
Yeah.
I mean, couldn't you do
Yes.
that instead of
Yes,
cohabitating?
there's all sorts of things you can do without living with a person to see
How they are at the
how they
house.
are and if you get along.
Yeah, 'cause that's
Some of the
important.
best advice I was given is there's 4 tests. This is for women. Sorry, guys. For women to test men. One is you need to imagine if you guys are like 98 years old, you can't do anything except sit all day together on the porch in rockers, and that's all you can do. Would you be happy doing that? Or is it really the excitement? So for instance, I was engaged to a guy in Ireland, and we traveled all over the place, like we'd have dates in New York City. I mean, it was awesome. And then once my friend told me this, I was like, that sounds boring. So it's the excitement of traveling. And I'm still friends with him, but to think about we just sit all day together and it's just the two of us not doing anything, my first thought was, it would be so boring. Sorry, my phone's going off.
I like these tests.
Huh?
Thank you
Yeah.
for this advice.
Another one was get him drunk and see how he acts. Because when people lose some level of control, it tells you a lot. Like, do they become angry? Do they become violent? Things like that. Get in a fight. If you have not gotten in a fight before you're married, you are setting yourself up for failure. Like, that is a big mistake. Fights are important. Fights tell you a lot about a person. Can they solve problems? Can they deal with things in a mature manner? Are you happy? Like, does it build the relationship? Because arguments should build the relationship, as weird as that sounds. That's the point of an argument. To air the dirty laundry, to air the problems, to get it out there, and to solve them, and to become closer together. So do arguments tear you apart and not get dealt with, or do they get dealt with in a productive manner that you're happy with? What was the 4th one? Oh, does he have the ambition to change the world? Whatever way he chooses, does he have ambition? Because ladies, you will never be happy married to a man without ambition. It's just how women are designed. Okay, guys, these are the things women are looking for. So if he does not have ambition to shake things up, to take a bite out of the world and make things different in whatever area he's choosing, then
He says like this, I'm here, right here.
has anybody seen The Quiet Man, the movie with John Wayne in Ireland? It's the only John Wayne movie I actually like because he finally gets it. Every other movie, he's like sticking it to a woman, and now she gets to stick it to him, so I like it. So he's an ex-boxer, and he's got PTSD, and he doesn't want to fight anymore. He's traumatized by his history, and he won't stand up for himself. And of course, the Irish are a hyper-aggressive bunch, and they can't stand people who won't stand up for themselves, and they will just tear you down until you do. That's how Irish culture works. And so they're in a relationship. I don't think they're married, but he wants to marry her. And she finally takes off and leaves. And she tells him, I cannot be married to a man that I don't respect. I can't be in a relationship with a man I don't respect.
I think I have seen that movie.
Yeah. And so finally he decides he's going to stick it to her and he's going to show her. So he like drags her through the village, and the entire Irish village is crowding out behind him to watch. And I think it was her brother that he was having an issue with, and so he finally just socks him in the face. And then he turns to her like, see, fine, does that make you happy? And she's like, okay, good. Finally, I got my way. I love it. It's the best movie ever with John Wayne.
I think besides ambition, though, they need to show that they do have a job, they have money, they need to show.
Well, that is
besides
part of ambition,
that
right?
they've achieved,
Yeah.
not just like wanting something.
Yeah.
But actually achieve something.
Yeah, working towards it. Yeah. There's a difference between ambition and dreaming.
Right.
You don't want a dreamer. You want somebody with true ambition who's willing to work hard, and that goes back to like the survival level stuff. A man with ambition is somebody who can take care of you if the crap hits the fan, and that's what women want, and that's what you need too. I mean, research shows, for instance, if you get a divorce, men's financial status barely changes after the initial blip of divorce. However, 50% of women are living in poverty after divorce, no matter what their prior financial status was. So no matter how rich you were, you have a 50-50 chance of living under the poverty line after divorce.
Wow.
Mhm.
Yeah, all that child support.
Yeah,
Spousal
hopefully.
support.
Hopefully. But there's a lot of women who, even though their husbands make a lot of money, they end up without any of it. Mostly because she's so stressed out, she finally says, I'm not taking anything, just end this. I can't handle
I
the
thought you
stress.
meant the man was ending up in.
Oh, well, sometimes they may be giving spousal support, yeah. But I think it's,
No, the man is in poverty because he has to pay the spousal
no,
support.
women are in poverty. Men are not in poverty.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I see.
Men's financial status is pretty much not affected by divorce. I mean, they may lose some money initially, but they're back at it working extra hours or whatever to compensate for
And
it.
the women have not had the work experience. because-
Women haven't had the work experience, they don't have the physical stamina, they don't, sometimes, many times, but they don't have the emotional stamina to deal with that level of stress. Even if you compare working single men with children, this was a study that was done, versus working single mothers with children, the mothers working the same amount of hours, you compare everything the same financial status, women have much higher levels of depression, stress-related illnesses than men, even in the same exact situation. So that is why women are supposed to look for a man who is ambitious, who will take care of things, and that kind of sort of thing. So I watched Twilight yesterday because I was sick, and it didn't help because Twilight's a terrible movie. But I mean, this is like the female dream, right? A bad boy who can just take care of business, who is willing to change who he is because he loves somebody so much. That's like, yeah, definitely a teenage
That's like the
romance.
most unrealistic dream I've ever
Isn't it? Right. They're like total abusers. I can barely control myself from killing you. But I do so much to it. So ridiculous. Yeah. All right, anyhow, the ages for marriage have changed dramatically. So the 60s, 20 for women, 23 for men. 2011, it was 26 for women, 29 for men. I think at this point it's 27 for women, and I think it's still 29 for men, if I remember right from the last time I saw the statistics. But big change, which also increases stress in some ways, decreases stress in other ways. So like fertility issues are skyrocketing because people are having children in their 30s or even 40s, and your body's not designed for that. Your bodies are designed to have children around that age, right? But most of those are not getting married at that age. And the truth is that divorce is higher at that age. So divorce spikes at 24, or 23, I guess, and then dips at 24, and then starts to go back up around 32, I think, 32 or 35.
So the new thing is to save your eggs, freeze them.
Yes, freeze your eggs. Yep.
And then when you're, ready,
And when you're 45,
got
you
your
can,
career or
Yep.
whatever.
you can have your kids. Yeah. And the other thing is for women to just have babies without a man around. So you can just go get donor sperm and have children. Because people aren't getting married, especially my generation. People just aren't getting married.
And what does that cost for the child? I have seen that there's a show on my long lost family.
Mm-hmm.
Where they're looking for, I found out I was adopted. I just wanted my birth mom, my birth dad. When you find out that you have a parent that you have no idea there was one episode like that. It was a sperm donor,
Mm-hmm.
and there's no way of knowing.
Right.
I mean, that
Of course,
person
nowadays
was
with
going
DNA
through such
testing.
conflict.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's going to be similar to, being a single parent and the other parent isn't around. So you don't know your medical history, your family history, you don't have that emotional connection. So it's definitely, I mean, anything besides a mom and dad in a nice middle-class home together is going to cause emotional distress.
I think it's more distressing though because it's someone who you just grab some random.
Yeah.
It wasn't a.
Kind of, I have a
There was
friend.
not a story behind
I
it.
have a friend who did that, and the reason was she was born with like a physical disfigurement, and she just said, I figured I'm never getting married, and I want to have kids, and I'd be a good mom, so I'm just doing it. Which it's hard to blame her for that. And her kid's getting older. I think she's 8 now. So, I mean, they're going through all that. But she told her from day one, you know, that as soon as she was old enough to have any understanding, she told her that that there was a nice man who had gifted her with DNA, and she sort of explained what DNA was, the stuff that builds you, and that it was a gift, and I'm so lucky to have you, that sort of thing. So her daughter, as far as I've seen, doesn't have huge levels of emotional distress. I mean, obviously she's going to be curious and wish she had a dad and wish she knew him, but I'm not sure it's any more difficult for her than any other child of a single parent. So, but it just depends. It's just like adoption. It can be turned into a wonderful thing, or it can be an awful thing depending on how it's dealt with.
What do you think the effect is in a home instead of being traditional where the man stays at home and raises the kids instead of the woman? What effect?
I think it can work either way. I mean, if you're a mom, you have to compensate for not having that masculine figure around. If you're a dad, you have to compensate for not having mom around. I have not seen any research that shows that it's any worse than a single mom. And there's some advantages to having dad around that mom can't provide. So, yeah. I mean, either way, if you're a single parent, you need to find somebody of the opposite sex to.
I mean like they're
help with
married
it.
and mom goes to work and he stays at home.
Like the stay-at-home
I haven't seen any research. Anecdotally, I can say that I don't feel like it works well. I've known a few people, and that's not, I mean, obviously a few people is not enough to say for sure. But the people that I've known, it hasn't turned out well. Mom's stressed out, mom's upset that she's missing everything with the kid growing up. You know, when dad calls her up and says, oh, he said his first word today, she's horrendously distressed by it, and it seems to be more difficult for moms to do that than for dads. However, I do know, well, I don't know the person, but I've seen a talk from a person who she is the working mom and he's the stay-at-home dad, and she's like, I can handle like 2 hours around these kids and I'm done. Like, I want to go back to work. So she claims, and of course it's a public figure, so I don't know if they're telling the truth, but she claims to be happy with it being set up that way.
So it's still more the exception, right?
Oh yeah, it's definitely the exception, because men generally define themselves more by their job than women do. So for a man to not have a job can be distressing. So there's a lot less men who would want to do that. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. It would have to match the personalities of both of those parents. But my experience has been it's more distressing to do it that way than the other way. It's more difficult. Okay, and we also have more unmarried parents. 41% of births in 2010 were to unmarried women. So these are, most of them would be women who just slept with somebody and got pregnant without being married. Some of them are the women who are just going to sperm banks. That's actually really increasing. And we have fewer children on average. It's not a problem for our country yet. Germany went below the required average of children in order to keep a country going. There's actually, we figured out how many children per person need to be born before a country will implode. So Germany, I think about a decade ago, they went under that number. So they've been doing a lot of things to try to encourage more people to have children, and they increase the immigration level, so they can compensate with that by having more immigrants coming in. Of course, now they've got all sorts of problems with immigrants, but that's a whole nother issue.
They're just trying to make sure their government doesn't implode.
Right, yeah. I think Germany has had quite a few issues with their government over the years, so it's a valid fear, I'd say. By the way, did you know homeschooling was illegal in Germany? I just heard that this morning. Yes, Hitler made it illegal. Of course, he wanted
And
to
they're still
brainwash
working
them.
under his frame?
And
I know,
it's
right?
still on the books. Yeah, isn't that crazy? Yeah.
That is.
So I think anything Hitler thought was good, we should probably
Dismantled.
yeah, right? Yes. I mean, I don't think I'd even buy a Volkswagen because Hitler is, I don't know. I've heard they're good cars. Okay, so we also have more working mothers, which wouldn't surprise anybody. In the 50s, only 12% of moms worked, and today it's over 60%. Now, there are pros and cons to that. There's nothing wrong with a mom working. There's nothing wrong with a mom staying home. There are benefits and there are disadvantages to both of them. Obviously, more time with your kids could increase all sorts of mental health things. However, kids also need some free time to do their own thing and get into some trouble, get punished for it. We can learn a lot through that. And with somebody always watching you, that may not happen. However, a working mom is more likely to have successful daughters. It significantly impacts girls. It doesn't affect boys quite so much. But working moms are much more likely to have daughters who are independent, who make their own money, who do their own thing, and so on,
About their business.
and get educated as well.
You know what, that's what I thought about my mother. I said, wow, my mom's doing it. She's coming home, she's getting dinner on the table by 5 o'clock. I haven't done that, that's that's where it stopped. But I did mirror I gotta go out and do what my mom's doing,
Right, yeah.
be a part of that. But, the dinner thing,
Yep.
I'm having trouble with that.
Yeah. And if you look historically, I mean, the stay-at-home mom that didn't really do anything except take care of the house and the kids is not historically accurate. I mean, women have always been more likely to stay at home and take care of the kids, but they also had farms that they had gardens and they ran small businesses and they did things to still make money. So the 1950s stay-at-home mom is sort of an aberration to history. That's not usually how moms have done it in the past.
That was probably just right after World War II when there was a car in every garage and chicken in every pot and all of that. And you could afford to stay
Yeah.
home.
And honestly, as a society, there may have been a need for that too, because now you had all of these men coming home from World War II who were highly traumatized. Like, that was a very traumatizing war. Maybe not as bad as Vietnam, but it also lasted longer than Vietnam. And many of them had physical disfigurements and, gassing and all sorts of horrible things that happened. And so maybe the stay-at-home wife was sort of like an emotional comfort that helped to sort of get society back on track. I mean, you could make an argument for that. So. All right, and then divorce, of course, is on, well, actually, I was going to say divorce is on the rise, but it's not. Divorce is decreasing. So it spiked in the 80s, and then it has decreased since. It went back up a little bit in like the late 90s, I think it was, but it's still generally on the decline. However, the divorce rate, I have 40 to 50% of there, but it's really depends on the research study. Some have said it's as high as 60 to 70% for the first marriage. So, and then every additional marriage after that increases the chances by another 10%. So by the time you get to your third or fourth marriage, chances of it being successful is almost zero. So there's no point in divorcing your first spouse.
No point in getting
Do you
married.
think that less people are getting married is why there's less divorce, or do you think?
Yes, that's actually one of the arguments. There's less people getting married, and more people living together. So when people living together break up, that's not technically a divorce. And we know that cohabitation has a much higher rate of breaking up than marriage. So if you include cohabitation breakups and divorces together, it's probably a much higher rate than it has been.
80%.
Yeah, probably, something like that. It's pretty bad. So the most accepted research says 50 to 60% rate of divorce for the first marriage. Now, that is including the really screwed up marriages as well as the marriages that have better chances. So there's some things you can do to increase your chances of a successful marriage. Number one, don't have sex before you get married. People who have sex before marriage have a higher divorce rate. And the more people you have sex with before marriage, the higher your divorce rates. Okay? Why is that?
You're not a committed person.
You're not as committed? Okay. What else?
You have something to compare it to.
You have something to compare it to? Okay. You could be unhappy. No, that's true. That's one of the theories. Also, remember
That's a good one.
oxytocin?
That's a good one, though. I can see that, yeah.
Remember oxytocin? What does oxytocin do to you?
Gives you
Makes you feel good. Gives you feelings of love and connection and trust. So you're dating somebody, and very quickly into dating, you sleep together, and all of a sudden your logical thinking goes out the window. Are you going to be really testing and determining if this is the person you should marry? No, because all your brain is saying is, yes, this is the right one for you, because that's what oxytocin does to you. So we have a lot of people sleeping together before marriage, and a lot of people not thinking through, is this the right person for me? And I know so many people who, they're dating someone, I know they shouldn't be in a relationship with this person, and then they have sex with them. Well, why did you have sex with somebody you already know you shouldn't be in a relationship with? Because I guarantee after that, all of a sudden you start justifying it in your brain. And the next thing you know, you're married, and then the next thing you know after that, you're divorced. It's not surprising. Another thing is don't live together before marriage. That increases the rate of divorce. Be the right age, so between 24 and 35 is the ideal time period. Don't get married too young. Don't wait too long either. Middle class, like I said, that's ideal. You're really poor, that creates a lot of hardship in the marriage, a lot of stress. But also being too wealthy creates a lot of stress. You spend more time working, not enough time together, so you have a higher rate of divorce. So middle class is perfect. And then here's another good one that I really like. Have a big wedding. That predicts successful marriages.
A big wedding?
A big wedding, yes.
Oh, I just thought that's such a waste of money. When you're spending 30, 40, 50,000 on a wedding that for one night that people won't remember, I mean.
But that predicts successful marriage.
But maybe you're talking about maybe more people present, because I would think.
No,
more
big marriage
people-
also means the money you
Or
spend
the
on it.
investment in your wedding?
I think that's what it is, because people who are really committed to making marriage work are more likely to spend money on their wedding. So I'm not sure if it's the big wedding itself, although, rituals and rites of passages are really important for our psychology. I mean, that's why marriage affects people. Even when they've been living together for 26 years, marriage all of a sudden means something, because these rituals do mean something to us. So the wedding itself may be a protective mechanism, but I also think it is the investment, the mindset that goes into having a big wedding. Because I had one person who came to our wedding venue, and when she saw our prices, which are not crazy expensive, she's like, I'm not spending that much money on a wedding. I was thinking like $500. I'm like, $500? Like, you can't even get married in your backyard for $500.
That's
And
hilarious.
she's like, well, this is my 5th marriage. I'm not spending that kind of money on a marriage because I'll probably just end up divorcing you.
$100 for each
That's
marriage.
literally what she said.
Wow.
And I
$500.
was like, well,
Well,
we
you
don't
go
want you
into a
getting married at our
marriage
venue
like
anyway, so that's fine. Yeah, go to the courthouse.
Maybe for her 6th marriage, she'll be willing to put out an extra 100.
Maybe, yeah, that would be nice. But she's right. I mean, by the time she's got her 5th or 6th marriage, the chance of it being successful is almost
Maybe
zero.
she's just really trying to prove to herself that she can make a marriage work.
Maybe.
More than being in love with the person she's
Yeah.
marrying.
And then she's walking around with the little kid from like a 2-year-old from her last marriage. I'm like, maybe you should wait a little longer before you jump into the next marriage. So yeah, I mean, I actually feel bad for anybody who gets to that state, but yeah. So anyhow, so big marriage, expensive wedding, big wedding, expensive wedding is actually protective for marriages. And then here's another one that you would not expect. Your parents' opinion does not affect your divorce rate. However, your siblings' opinion does. If your siblings don't like that person, don't get married to them. Or think very carefully about whether you should get married. Because if the siblings disapprove, it makes the divorce rate skyrocket.
Why?
There's multiple theories. One is that your siblings know you better than anybody else, including your parents. So if they don't believe this person's right for you, they're probably correct. And then also, we tend to value our siblings' opinions more than other people's. So that can undermine your confidence in your marriage. And then your siblings can also be more annoying than anybody else in the world. So imagine every family interaction together with your sibling, them disapproving of your spouse. That can cause some stress. And then now your spouse doesn't like them. And yeah, I have a friend who married somebody that her siblings absolutely hate. And he now hates them. He unfriended them on Facebook, which was like super insulting. And now like every family holiday, it's bad. It's really bad, yeah.
Can I ask one question about the lasting marriage thing?
Yes.
If a person like the woman who has been married 5 times, in her older years, and a man for that matter, in his older years, want to get married for their 8th time, does it mean that it might last a little longer because now they're at this stage in their life where they just want to not be alone?
It could.
So that they make it
Yeah.
last.
It could. And I've never seen any research on elderly marriages and the success rate, but it's possible. I mean, in theory, older people are getting a little bit wiser, but I don't know if that's necessarily the
I
case.
just wanna sit and rock on the porch.
Yeah.
Yeah. Are there any studies, like if you have been divorced, like I have, and you want to get married a second time, anything that can make it stronger, or?
Yes, so having enough time in between the first marriage and the second marriage is very helpful. 5 years minimum is what's most psychologists would agree with. That if you're not waiting at least 5 years to remarry, then you have not dealt with all of your emotional crap from the last marriage. Going to therapy is always, well, not always, but it's often a good thing. Depends on your therapist. Not having children is probably the biggest thing. So if you have a blended family, it increases the chances of divorce because there's a lot of emotional distress with your children. That stress feeds back into the marriage, and you're more likely to end up divorcing. I remember, do you guys remember Dr. Laura from the radio?
Oh, yes, I love
Such a
Dr.
jerk,
Laura.
Right? I love her too. She's such a jerk to people. She's like the meanest psychologist in the world. And I remember she would tell people, don't get remarried until your children are grown up.
Right.
And I thought that's such great advice because, I mean, it can work, but, I mean, any marriage can work. The weirdest marriage can work. But it's just,
That's one.
the cards are already stacked against you, so you're just adding more and more cards by, you know, having a remarriage, having children and a blended family. All of those are extra difficulties.
But even though divorce is really bad for kids, isn't it better if there's like a really high abuse thing that's going on that's not solved?
For you to get a divorce? Yeah, there's generally better outcomes are seen if a highly abusive marriage dissolves.
If that's what led to it, not like some other.
Adultery and abuse are those two things in a marriage can just devastate children. It obviously devastates the marriage, but the children, it can be really difficult for them. But it mostly depends on how divorce is handled. So the more fighting in a marriage, the better the children are after a divorce.
The more fighting?
The more fighting there is in the marriage when they
Oh.
divorce,
Because it's
the
more
better.
calm. Okay,
Yeah,
I
because
see.
it's calmed down. Yeah. But divorce overall is pretty distressing for children, and it's becoming more and more distressing. We're seeing a much wider divide between children of divorce and children of intact families. And one theory is because parents are so much closer with their kids now than they were in the past. So like in the 70s, if your parents divorced, well, you probably didn't spend all that much time with your parents anyways, and you didn't have a huge emotional bond with your parents. Because back in the 70s and maybe early 80s, parents expected kids to just go out and do kid stuff and stop bothering you, right? Don't come home until the lights come on. And then we might spend some time together over dinner, and then you're expected to go do your own thing again after that while your parents watch the news. That's how it was.
60 minutes.
Right? 60 minutes, yeah, exactly. And they purposely put the news on so that you don't want to watch TV with them. Right? I did that the other day. I'm like, I just want to sit down and watch TV, and my sister's kids come in. I'm like, that's National Geographic, and they're gone. It's like the spawning of salmon or something like that. They're gone. So nowadays, though, I mean, people call their parents every single day, like even after when they're out of the house. Like you're shaking your head no. Like every time I go to Europe, my mom will not hear from me until I'm back from Europe because I'm having too much fun. Like I'm not calling you every day. And I know people, like a friend of mine, she's an older friend, she has a daughter my age, and they talk for 2 hours on the phone every single day. How do you have time for that? That seems so strange to me. So you can imagine if her parents divorced, which they did, you can imagine what sort of distress that could have caused for her being that close to her parents. So that's the prevailing theory of why kids nowadays are having even more distress over divorce than they used to. Yep.
Do you advocate Dr. Laura staying home with the child? I like that idea. I feel like kids need someone at home base.
Yes, I think the younger a child is, I think the more a parent needs to be home. As the child gets older, less and less of that. But like my mom worked when I was a kid, but looking back at it now, I don't know if it was considered part-time or not, but she was home a lot. So I always thought of myself as I had a working mom, not a stay-at-home mom. And then I think back and she was home all the time. Like
You knew
There's-
she worked, that's all.
yeah. I knew she worked, and then even if she had to work, my dad would usually, or my grandma would take us to her work, and we got to hang out at her work because her boss liked having us kids around. So even with that, we just felt like we were always around our mom. So we had maybe 2 hours between school and when a parent was home. And I think that was just enough time for us to have our little adventures, to get into a little bit of trouble, do our kids' stuff, but not to get into too much trouble. So I can't imagine what we would have done if our parents weren't home until like 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock, like some parents are. Yeah. So I think a balance is fine. Parents don't need to be home constantly, but they need to be home somewhat, at least one of the parents. So. All right, going on. More children are also living in poverty. 22% of children live below the poverty line, which is atrocious. That is a lot, yeah. And there's all sorts of negative outcomes, physically as well as mentally, with living in poverty. So that's not good. Most of those are minority. I shouldn't say most, but a large percentage of them are minority families. There are definitely poor white families living in poverty too. But probably around 80% of children in poverty are from minority families, and around 20% are from the majority white. So that's not a good thing. And that is mostly being affected by the economy. So, Georgia, would you mind shutting that door? Thanks. There must be a class I could out right at this time. There are more remarriages, and like I said before, divorce predicts women in particular living in poverty. So it may be the fact that so many people are divorcing that is affecting the poverty rate. And when you remarry, you tend to remarry with less money than before. Possibly because it affected your job, maybe because now your spouse took half of your retirement, or you owe child support or spousal support. So every remarriage you enter into with less money than the one before, which of course causes more stress and leads to a higher divorce rate. We also have more years without children, more multi-generational families, and those are all affecting the economy too, or being affected by the economy. So it's hard, like the economy is bad right now, it's hard to make a living, it's hard to even get a job. So a lot of people are like, I don't want to add children to this mess. So we're waiting longer and longer to be more financially stable. And then more families are living together because economically it's easier to survive with multiple incomes in the same household. Okay. We also have fewer caregivers of aging adults, which is, I think it's a good thing. Caregiving is very stressful on people. Every 1 year of caregiving for an elderly person is like, I think it's an effect of 5 years on your telomeres, which is the cap on the end of your DNA, and that predicts aging. It's like the biggest predictor of aging. So it is really hard on people to be caregivers.
I took care of my husband's parents. They lived in our home for 10 years.
Yeah.
And
That's right.
we thought they were going to be there maybe a year. They were 80-something, 86 when they passed. They were 70-something when they moved in. Oh my gosh. I can't even tell you. That was a full-time job on top of our full-time job.
Right.
And
then if you have children in the house too, that's why we call it sandwich.
We'd go down the hill, and then we'd be at a friend's house for dinner, and we'd get a phone call, Mom fell, you need to come home. I can't get her off the ground, I can't get her, you know, it was so difficult. So now I'm gonna die sooner because of that. Is that what you're saying? My telomeres are aged.
Yes, no, your telomeres age. However, there are ways to regrow your telomeres.
Okay, great.
So humor, laughing, that's one of the most protective things for your telomeres. Eating well, nutrition, socializing with friends.
So this ketogenic diet?
Ketogenic diet, yes, absolutely. That will help your telomeres to regrow. Yeah, absolutely. That's actually proven by research.
Is it just in general, or when you have like, or when the adults are like, they really need somebody there all the time?
When they really need somebody.
Okay.
Yeah. If you just have, like when my grandma comes by, she's 83, she doesn't really need all that much help. Although actually, I just take it back, I'm sure she decreases my telomeres. She does not need any help, but she still demands help. So, yeah, I mean, if they don't need you and they're independent, my grandma's pretty independent, so.
When I lived with my grandpa, he was all I did was make him breakfast, and then
And
he
he was
didn't
like,
want us to help him with anything, and he just went on to his expense, and then we see him when he wants to eat.
right,
But
Yeah.
like, that was my grandpa, but he was sarcastic as hell, so we would always have fun together.
right, yeah, so then your telomeres are probably fine. However, like my neighbors have 2 parents living with them with Alzheimer's.
Oh.
Yeah. And they're like the ones that will stay at the house and run off. And like I remember once I was driving home and there's police everywhere. I'm like, what is going on? Because I'm out in the middle of nowhere. And when I say neighbor, I mean like a mile away is my neighbor. So I'm like, what's going on? And his mom she was lost in the desert somewhere. She'd taken off, and everybody was searching for her for hours.
By foot?
So, by foot, yeah. That's what people with Alzheimer's tend to do. So their telomeres are shot. Like they need some de-stressing. So actually, I send my sister's kids down to their house with food or something occasionally to try to cheer them up. But then, of course, they freak out. They're like, they call me up. Your niece was walking down the street alone. Yeah, that's what kids do. It's okay. So now they're finally used to it.
We're Danish.
Yeah, we're Danish. It's fine. It's fine.
But isn't it important for our society to take care of the adults?
Oh yes, I'm not saying we shouldn't do it, but we do have to recognize it is very hard on people to do that. Like for instance, the guy who played Superman, what was his name? Christopher Reeves. When he broke his neck with the horse riding accident, his wife was his primary caregiver, and as soon as he died, she got cancer.
Oh, Lord.
Yeah. So
No time to regrow her telomeres.
right, no time to regrow her telomeres. I believe she survived it, if I remember right. But I mean, that just shows you how hard that is on your body. So, like if your siblings are the primary caregiver of your elderly parents, have some compassion on them, help out a little bit more, because you're killing your siblings. I mean, maybe you don't like your siblings, so you're okay with that. But it's really hard on people. And it literally is shortening the lifespan by having to care for these extremely, I'm not just saying like your dad or your grandfather does pretty well on his own, but the extremely ill, like my neighbor's parents with Alzheimer's, it's very hard on their bodies. And they've shown, like they used to be really cheerful neighbors, like they're the ones that would walk by and howdy neighbor, walking their dog. And now they walk by and they're like, hello, yeah, and shuffling like zombies, yeah.
So, do they have to be living with you?
No, having your parent, if you just caring for the elderly is difficult. And not just the elderly, anybody who's sick.
My
You
mom
have
had
disabled
cancer,
child.
it's the same thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I come home from my work, I go there to take care of her. I was exhausted and sad when my mom passed, but at the same time,
You have that relief because the
it
responsibility
was
is
just
on you.
awesome,
Yeah.
the responsibility of having to.
Yeah, and so many people are then, I mean, that's like an extra huge stress because you feel bad, because you feel happy that this person died.
Yes.
Yeah, but you don't really feel happy the person died. That's the difference you have to make in your head. You're just happy the responsibility is gone, and also happy that the person's not suffering anymore, because that sucks too. So,
What if you have a child that needs, like an older child that needs a lot of care? Hopefully she won't in the future, but how do you do that if you're reconsidering marriage? How do you take care of?
you have to marry a very understanding person. If you have a disabled child and
Yeah, I mean, she's getting better, she's getting a lot better, but she's still.
then you have to marry a caregiver. You have to marry somebody who has a huge amount of compassion and is willing to help as much as you are. Otherwise, don't marry that person because you will regret it. Yeah. There's nothing wrong with being a caregiver. God bless all the caregivers out there. It is a wonderful thing, but it is just, it's hard on people. So the fact that we don't have as many people in this position, which is mostly because people are, I mean, even though lifestyle disorders are on the rise, overall health is actually better because of modern medicine and everything. So that's the primary reason that we have less people doing caregiving. So that's actually a good thing. People are living longer. It takes many more years for you to get to the stage where you need a caregiver, if you need one at all. Eat the ketogenic diet and you may not ever need one. Hopefully you just die surfing on something like that. Okay, so these are the percentages of parents. Most people are still living in two-parent households at 69%. 23% have a single mom. 4% have a single dad. And then another 4% are living with no parents, like in a orphanage foster care system sort of deal. Okay? But all of these lead to more problems. Higher crime rate, more physical issues, more drug addiction, and so on. So, and I'm not saying that every single child in this quadrant is doing bad, but it just increases the chances of it, which of course then feedback and is bad for society and the economy and all that good stuff. All right, so let's talk about the family throughout the lifespan. So, infants. The way that parents care for their children does not matter the gender. Mothers and fathers both care for infants in similar ways. Now, one of the big differences that we see is mothers are, in the research literature, they're called gatekeepers to parenting. So mothers determine whether fathers get the chance to actually be nurturing parents to their child. So sometimes you might see, like, dad is trying for the very first time in his life to change the diaper. He sucks at it because didn't we all the first time we changed the diaper? And mom goes, oh, here, let me do it. And she swoops in and she takes care of the baby. And so dad never gets the chance to develop those nurturing skills. Or dad's holding the baby, baby's crying, which I don't know about you, but anytime I pick up somebody else's baby, they usually cry. And until you develop the skills for calming a baby down, then baby's gonna cry. But you have to have a chance to interact with an upset child in order to learn how to do that. But then mom swoops in, or maybe grandma swoops in and takes the child, here, I'll calm the baby down, and then dad never does it. And then dad's uncomfortable around children, and so he just stops interacting. Because every time he does, he gets punished for not doing it right. And so that is the main reason why we see a big differentiation between nurturing between males and females. However, in a situation where dad is allowed to be nurturing, or he grew up with a lot of kids in the family, so he has experience, we don't see any difference in the way moms and dads take care of infants. Now that does change as the child gets older, but in infants, it tends to be the same. Dads are able to feed, dads are able to provide sensitive parenting, they're very good at that. They become objects of attachment, so if mom's not there, the baby can securely attach to dad, which means they're getting feelings of emotional security in the world because dad is there. Mothers do spend more time directly caring for infants, and fathers tend to play with kids more than mothers do. Mothers are doing more of the feeding, diaper changing, and so on, whereas dads are doing the tickling and tossing them in the air. The fun stuff, yeah. And this gets more extreme as the child gets older. Okay? Dad does more and more playing and roughhousing, mom does more and more of the caring and nurturing, which can sometimes be stressful for mom because they want to have fun too, and they don't always want to be the ones changing the diapers. So dads, remember that. Sometimes mom wants to have fun too, so you need to step in and do some of the nurturing so they have time to have fun. And then some moms get annoyed that dad is, you're riling them up. I just tried to calm them down, or it's an hour before bedtime and now you're getting them all riled up. So that is one cause of friction between the married couple. However, research shows that dad's playing and mom's calming down is actually a really good dynamic for the child, because they're learning how to control their emotions. They're learning both how to raise their emotions and they're learning how to calm down their emotions. So, not having a dad around, children get very little roughhousing, very little play with just mom, and that is considered problematic with psychologists. So, the dad playing is really good for kids. If you're a single mom, then you need to bring a lot more playing and roughhousing into the family, which women don't tend to naturally do. Some of my sisters are the ultimate roughhousing mom. I swear, like, if CPS came in when she was roughhousing with her son, she'd probably get her kids taken away. They're like punching and kicking and throwing over the couch, and he loves it. He's like the toughest kid in the world. What was that?
From the top rope.
Yeah, exactly. It's like a wrestling match. It's hilarious. But yeah, he doesn't seem to mind. This is the percentages of paid work, housework, and childcare, 1965 to 2011. So you can see dads back in the day did a lot more working outside the house. Moms did the majority of the housework. That dynamic still exists, but moms are doing a lot more outside work, a lot less housework. Dads are doing more housework, but overall, there's a lot less housework being done.
Dirty houses.
Dirty houses, yeah.
I feel like I have the double duty though.
Yes, you
The
do.
working, the coming home doing the house, and then maybe occasionally making dinner.
Right.
But, you know, it's a job that.
It is double duty.
Yeah, and the guys get to sit, I'm sorry guys, but you guys get to sit home and, well, they don't read papers anymore.
No, I don't know.
Watch
Watch their
television.
Kindle, read their Kindle.
Read their Kindle,
Yeah.
right. Watch television and kind of have that free time, downtime that moms don't get.
Although the interesting thing is, here's the crazy part. Look at the total amount of hours being done. right? We're working harder in general now than we used to. Yeah. So mom's working an extra 2 hours, dad's working an extra 5 hours.
That's interesting.
Isn't that interesting? Yeah. So all this modern technology, feminism, we get to go out and work. Now we're just all working harder. So, although I don't blame feminism for that, except feminism is this right here, or this right here, sorry. Paid work, that we're spending more hours working. But yeah, dads are spending less hours working, which also means less money, right? Because men tend to make more money than women. Which may be why the overall hours of working has increased.
Yeah, I think the money has gone down.
Yeah.
The
And
paychecks
notice-
have gone down.
Notice the hours with childcare in total have increased tremendously too. So it used to be 12 and a half hours, and now it's, 21 hours working with your kids. And our kids are more screwed up than ever, so maybe we just need to lay off.
Childcare meaning they're at someone else's.
No, taking care of your children.
Oh.
Cooking for them, interacting with them, helping them with homework, whatever. Yeah. So, I mean, the good news is that dads are helping significantly more than they used to. Bad news is we're all more stressed out. So, I mean, maybe if we spent less time interacting with our kids, then it would lower our stress levels and their stress levels. Just let them go play and you take a break. It's good for everybody. All right, so I mentioned this earlier. So the better your relationship with your spouse, the better you are with your kids, or the better your kids are. But you also act better towards your kids. So mothers who had a close, supportive relationship with their husbands were more patient and more sensitive with their children. And we know that the more sensitively you respond to your kids, the better their outcome. So it is important for your children to have a good relationship. Fathers who just had a pleasant conversation with their wives are more supportive and engaged when they interact with their children. So stop picking fights with your husband about him not interacting with your kids, and go have a nice conversation, and he's more likely to interact with your kids. Isn't that interesting?
Some reverse psychology.
Reverse psychology. Reverse psychology is the only psychology that works with men, ladies. I'm just telling you.
Yeah.
Men think in the opposite way that us ladies think.
Okay.
Guys, remember that too. Reverse psychology back to us.
Do you remember the I Love Lucy where she said, I don't want to build that barbecue, but I want the barbecue built for the summer. They were living in the country.
Yeah.
And she says, here's what we'll do. We'll go out there, we'll make a lot of noise, we'll act like we're, and they'll come out and they'll go, you don't know what you're doing, let us do it.
Yep.
And they did come out and
Yeah.
they said, no, you can help.
Yeah.
So they end up having to help build the barbecue.
Right. It didn't work out
You
too
know,
good.
no.
Yeah. Exactly. Now, when we're talking about the child, like I said, the responsiveness, the sensitivity, that's important. So parental acceptance and responsiveness, the extent to which parents are warm, supportive, and sensitive to their child's needs is very important to parenting. So you have to respond to your kids' needs. And that doesn't mean just being hypersensitive, but being sensitive to what is the sensitivity level your kid needs. Because some kids need you to be really sensitive and some kids don't. That's fine. My sister's son is huge on roughhousing and he's super tough, but if she tries that with her daughter, then her daughter will get all upset. So she has to act differently. And then demandingness and control. How much demand do you put on your children? How much do you control their decisions? Some level of demand and control is good, but there needs to be, the children need to feel like they have control over their own lives. Okay? So structure, that they have control within the structure that you've put down. They need to be making choices. That's why it's really good to let them go out on their own and do things by themselves, because then you're not micromanaging every single thing they did. That's the only time children have to have control over their lives. So if you don't ever let them get away from adult supervision, your children never develop a sense of control over their life, right? Which is not a good thing. Then we have the different parenting styles. You guys have probably heard this in Psych 101. So you have authoritarian, authoritative, and permissive parenting. And then you also have neglectful, but we tend to neglect that one. So authoritarian, this is the strict parent. This is the one that acts as if they have authority when they're really just overbearing and rigid and controlling. So these parents, authoritarian parents, tend to have perfect children. Kids don't break rules, they're doing great until they get away from their parents. and then they go crazy. So these are the kids who, as soon as their parents go away on vacation, they throw a huge party at the house and trash the place. Or when they're with their friends, they do drugs. So they're the perfect child at home when they're under this rigid supervision, but they're completely rebellious otherwise. The authoritative parent, this is the parent who has that structure. There are certain things you can do, certain things you can't do. I am super strict on these things, but then there's a lot of gray area, and I'm flexible with that. If you have a chore to do the dishes, but I'm not going to get on you about how to do the dishes. Just get them done. If they're not good enough, then you'll have to do them again. It's up to you how long you take it. I remember being a kid, and my parents were big on doing chores, so being like 5 years old, doing dishes, and there's bubbles everywhere. And my mom said, you guys would just make a mess. You'd spend like 3 hours just getting bubbles all over the kitchen. So that's what an authoritative parent does. Here, you have to do something. I'm putting demands on you. I'm saying there's certain things that are required, but how it gets done, the creativity involved in all of this, I'm going to be flexible on. I can tell you, if my parents had caught me going off to a party, they would have killed me, like without permission. I'd be dead. However, when they came home and I had painted my bedroom without permission, they were like, "Wow, good job! Like that's really ambitious. Go get her right there." And they didn't, scream and yell at me like some parents would have.
Maybe
so
because it was your space and they.
because it was my space and they respected that. Yeah, to some degree. I mean, there were certain things that I knew there was a line, but then there was so much flexibility with other stuff, and that did cause more problems for my parents, I'm sure, because there were certain times when I thought this line is gray, I can step right over it, and my parents went, wait a minute, actually, let me draw that line a little firmer because that was not okay. So there was a lot more discipline, a lot more interacting versus the authoritarian parent. That kid knows like every single rule in the house, and that is going to be exactly like I'm going to get in trouble, really serious trouble if I cross this line. And so there is not a lot of creativity. There's no flexibility. Creativity can't develop without flexibility. So you are not going to get a creative child. You're just going to get a brat if you are too strict. However, then you have the permissive parent, right? So this is the parent that's the exact opposite, where there aren't a lot of rules. They just let the parents do whatever they want. These are the parents who say, if you're going to drink, just come home and drink. That way I know where you are. Or if you're going to have sex, then just come home and have sex together, and I'll give you a condom because I don't want you to get an STD.
That's just unthinkable. I'm sorry.
Right? That's very common to hear. Very common to hear. Some of you are probably
Not the
sitting
sex
in here
thing.
going, well, I thought that was the right thing to
No.
do. That is permissive parenting. So it's child-centered. The kid is the center of your world. The kid gets to define your world. The kid basically gets to make the rules themselves. And that is not good for a kid. Kids need boundaries. Kids feel safe when you have put boundaries out there for them. Sort of like go on a camping trip. Right? How many of you have never gone camping before? Like seriously, not in a car. Where you hike in 20 miles into a wilderness area and you go camping. And you set up. Yeah. But now do it without a tent.
Bears.
Just sleep outside in your sleeping bag. Some of you, even car camping, you'd be freaked out about it. Because that little flimsy structure just makes us feel safe, right? I don't know, I just have a barrier between me and the scary
bears.
outside world, the bears, which could easily, like, one clog, and they got you. I never felt safe in a tent. I always had to sleep in between my sisters, or no, just not having. Because when I was a kid in Joshua Tree, there was a little girl who somebody cut the side of the tent and stole her out of the tent, and that's all I could think about when I was sleeping. If somebody was going to come and steal me out of the tent. Yes.
So you wanted them to steal your sisters.
My sisters, yeah. Because my sisters were tough, man. If they stole them, they'd regret it. If they stole me, I didn't have a chance. Yeah, but that's. I don't think I ever told them why I insisted on sleeping in the middle. They just thought I was a coward, which I was a coward. So. But yeah, there's just something about having that tent, that barrier between you and that external world that just psychologically makes you feel a little safer. And that's the same thing that happens with kids. When you have those rules, those boundaries, they feel safer. Okay? Controlling people are fearful people. So control takes away fear. And you don't want your child to be excessively afraid of the world, so some level of control helps to take away their fears. Okay? So neglectful parenting is obviously also bad. So this is when you just don't have anything to do with your kid. You reject your kid. There may be hostility or there may be indifference altogether. Like I worked with a kid in therapy who he was one of the 4% that don't have parents. He was in a facility, and they found him at 2 years old. His mom hadn't been home for 2 weeks, and he was feeding himself with crackers and ketchup from the fridge. Yeah, for they believe for 2 weeks he was doing that. Yeah, emaciated and everything. Because of course by the time 2 weeks are over, he's out of crackers. So yeah, crazy, right? So obviously neglectful parent. So the best thing you could do for your child out of all of these would be the authoritative parent. So this is a parent that has firm guidelines, but then there's lots of gray areas where there's flexibility. The permissive kid just tends to be wild and not able to control themselves very well because there was never any control put on them, so they don't know how to control themselves. The neglectful, the kid who grows up with neglectful parents, they can have all sorts of issues. That's not as bad as straight out abusiveness, which usually, by the way, goes with authoritative, wait, hold on, did I say it right? Authoritarian, yeah. I mix them up too, so make sure you really study those hard. It doesn't matter how many times I teach this, I can never remember the difference between the two. So I think probably authoritarian is the worst. So the research suggests that. Authoritarian and neglectful are both pretty bad. Permissive is not as bad as authoritarian. So you're better off just letting your children be free, hippie, wild children than to be this overly strict parent. Yeah. All right, you want me to take a break? You guys seem tired today. Okay, so let's come back at, we'll just take a 10-minute break, 9:30. Please get some blood flowing through you.
You brought up the Volkswagen.
Yes.
So we have a friend from she married one of our friends from here. It's always kind of quirky, out of her mind.
Yes.
And Dutch Jewish. And my husband was talking about this VW bus that he had. He said, oh my gosh, it was the best thing I had. And, I fixed it up. And as he talked about it, she got really, that's the last time we spoke to them, by the way. Not the man, but we never saw her. She got so upset about do you know what he did to my family? I mean, she just went nuts. And he was like, all you're talking about is the car.
Yeah.
I bought a VW, and it was a great car. And that just insulted her. Insulted her. I mean, she was,
I didn't know there was a connection between them.
Yeah, Hitler created the Volkswagen bus.
Yeah, she didn't speak to us after that, and we speak to her husband, Reed, all the time, but she's not her.
Do you ever ask him about it? No,
He knows that she's crazy, and we know that he knows that she's crazy. So,
Interesting.
but I just thought that was hilarious when you said that. I was like,
Yeah.
oh my God, that's exactly what happened.
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's interesting.
And I know she had this. She was always very sensitive about the loss of her family, of course.
Yeah.
But it was for her. It was a huge. It's still even now.
Yeah.
Her family's affected by it. Her mom, her grandma. She said that's all she's got left because of him. And how dare you buy his car?
Pretty sure that the Third Reich does not get the money from it anymore. But yeah, how interesting.
He just wanted to be a hippie man. He just wanted to have this
Right.
little love mobile, I guess.